All right. So in the spirit of starting our on time and getting through our presentation, I'm going to get going. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Community Engagement Tips, Techniques, and Virtual Tools. My name is Bonnie Arden. I'm a support services technician with the First Nation Land Management Resource Center. I'm a member of Sooke First Nation, and I live and work here in the village of Syossin on Vancouver Island. So this session is being recorded and we're taking note of your feedback and questions, just so everyone knows. Next slide, please, Adam. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Resource Center, we're a First Nations organization and we're dedicated to serving and supporting First Nations communities who are looking to reestablish control over their lands, their natural resources, and environment through the historic government-to-government framework agreement on First Nations land management. The Resource Center was established by the Lands Advisory Board to undertake its technical responsibilities to the framework agreement signatory First Nations. We do this through support that provides resources, curricula, and training programs for the development and implementation of community land codes. And we provide assistance for First Nations who encounter difficulties and request assistance from the Resource Center to obtain the expertise they need to resolve their issues. The RC provides First Nations with supports and assistance during the interested, developmental, transitional, and operational phases. Support Services is the first point of contact for First Nations wanting to access all of the fantastic land code governance training, supports, and resources that you're going to learn about here today. We want to remind you that our materials are based on our strategic approach to land governance and management training centered on the framework agreement. Next slide, please. So today we'll be walking through the tips, techniques, and virtual tools for community engagement. I just want to take a moment to introduce you to our presenters for this session. First, we have Stephen McGlenn. He's a specialist in land use planning and curriculum delivery, and he's on our land code governance team. We have Adam Wright, a planner who works on our land code governance team as well. And Jeremy Bonham, who is a support services technician like myself in the BC region, and he's going to be monitoring the chat for this session. There will be time at the end of presentations for questions, comments, and discussion. If you're not comfortable speaking or having technical difficulties, please use the chat to post your questions and comments. Jeremy will be checking. Okay. So due to the current impacts of COVID-19, learning about creative methods of engaging with your community has never been more important. Whether your community is interested in or is developing or implementing a land code, developing plans, or making land use decisions, there are many considerations for developing a comprehensive community engagement strategy that will work in favor of achieving your community's priorities. The Resource Center is going to discuss with you tools, tips, and techniques that have worked to engage communities through the various stages of governing reserve lands and resources, including building awareness around a topic, a plan, or a project, and bringing people together in different ways using a variety of tools that can take back and utilize in your own community engagement strategies. At the end of the presentation, we'll provide you with some links to websites of interest, including the Resource Center website, where you'll find additional information on the framework agreement. Slide, please. So land code governance is different than lands management under the Indian Act. The land code enshrines community engagement and in some cases community consent and other decision-making processes as a requirement before certain types of land use decisions can be made. It provides an opportunity for community members to have their voices heard and therefore leads to better decision-making. Community engagement is an opportunity to gather historical knowledge and information from elders and community members. It builds a stronger, more trusting relationship between leadership, committees, and community. When members feel included in a given process, they're more likely to feel empowered in their ability to contribute and have a sense of ownership over decision-making. Laws, plans, or policies will be reflective of community priorities and traditions. Community engagement increases the visibility and understanding of the topics. And now I'd like to turn it over to Stephen McGlenn to get into community engagement under land code. Stephen?
Thanks for that, Bonnie. Adam and I just delivered another presentation kind of related to this slide. And again, coming from the Resource Center, our perspective is really about self-government and the role that community engagement plays in self-government is really important. And I'll get to that in this slide. So you may have seen versions of this slide elsewhere. It's kind of a common way of framing community engagement and the different reasons why we do community engagement. And starting at the bottom is we do engagement just to inform, right? Just to tell our members this is what we're up to, like that, and using common tools like websites and newsletters and open houses, you know, before the pandemic and all that. The next kind of deeper level of engagement is to involve our members. And this is using things like committees, doing meetings, workshops, community mapping, those sorts of things to really, it's more than just informing the members of what you're up to, but also trying to involve them and get their feedback around, you know, things that you're doing and to adjust your course based on their feedback. And then the top level is about empowering. And this is where, you know, community engagement is more about, whoops, we're going all over the place. There we go. Community engagement is more about putting the decision-making power in the hands of your community. So that's a very deep level of community engagement. And that's things like, you know, communities with land codes may require ratification votes for certain types of decisions, like, you know, approving a really long-term lease, like a 99-year lease on community lands that may trigger a ratification vote, or adopting a land use plan may require membership approval of some kind under your land code, right? So that's kind of an example of empowerment. And so just important to recognize, you know, it's useful to think about why you're doing community engagement before you embark on it, and to think, are we trying to inform and involve or empower our membership? And just something to keep in mind too, on the right side of the screen, you can see that arrow. Generally, the more efforts you put in and the more you're trying to empower your membership, it's generally going to require more time, more money, more effort and capacity to do that type of engagement. Although, you know, things like websites and newsletters and stuff, that does require a lot of time and effort as well. So not to minimize, you know, those types of things, but just generally, the deeper you're trying to engage your membership, the more, you know, effort you're going to have to put in. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of things that communities that are operating under a land code do to try and promote inclusive and accessible community engagement. Really simple things, you know, in terms of offering transportation to, you know, people who may not have a vehicle or access to a vehicle. You know, food is a big part of First Nations culture, and offering, you know, meals at the engagement sessions is pretty standard in my experience, obviously when we were gathering in person. You know, things like offering childcare, following cultural protocols. So, you know, opening the meeting and closing the meeting in accordance with your community's protocols. Really just trying to reflect your community identity and how your meetings are run and how you do engagement is really key. Having a community engagement strategy, and we're going to talk about that throughout this presentation, but really, again, before you engage in your community engagement, trying to strategize and create a bit of a roadmap for yourself. You know, a good rule of thumb when you're doing community engagement is whose voice is not being heard. You know, from a planning perspective, that's always worth thinking about. So who's at the meeting that's not sharing, and who's not even attending the meeting, and how can we get their voices involved in a planning process or a community engagement piece. Establishing meeting ground rules, that's really key for community meetings, especially when you're discussing, you know, potentially tense subjects, and having those kind of ground rules and having a really a skilled facilitator to guide your community engagement sessions, you know, to make sure that people are respecting one another, that, you know, you're being heard, everyone has a chance to share, that sort of thing. And overall, for those of us who work for the First Nations and you're doing community engagement, really demonstrating that you're listening and caring. You know, if an elder gets up in a meeting and shares something, well, I think it's important for us as planners and as lands managers to really recognize and respect what's being shared, and to show that you're incorporating that feedback and it's actually making a difference. Next slide, please. So we want to talk about a strategic approach to community engagement. And you guys are all probably faced with this challenge in your communities where, you know, the lands department maybe is doing like a land use plan or something, and the health department's doing a health plan, and chief and council's doing, you know, some major project, and everybody's trying to engage the community at once. And it can really produce, you know, engagement fatigue or planning fatigue amongst your membership. And because there's just so much happening, right? And there's people are asking them questions, and it can just get tiring and confusing as well. So taking a strategic approach is really valuable in terms of, as an organization, not just as a project manager or a department, but as an organization, how are we aligning our efforts and coordinating our approach to community engagement so that, you know, different departments and staff aren't engaging the community at the same time on different projects, or if they are, they're doing it in a way that aligns, you know, the feedback and that. So some things to think about on this slide in terms of how to create an engagement strategy. And at the Resource Center, we can provide more support for you if you're looking to develop, you know, an engagement strategy. But things to think about: what does successful engagement look like at the end of your process, right? So if you're doing a land use plan that requires community approval, then that community approval, that's going to be a key part of what successful engagement looks like, right? So you've got to build that into your strategy. Really knowing why you're engaging your community. What's the project? Why does it matter? And what role does community feedback play in the project? Obviously, if you're operating under a land code, you need to know your land code and what those requirements are, so that you're meeting your legally defined thresholds for community engagement. Knowing your community, right? So who are you engaging with, and why? And what are their engagement preferences? Have they been engaged, and have they shared similar information on a previous project? Right, there's a lot of opportunities or a lot of examples I can think of when communities engage the members on a project, and all that information and data that they collected, it gets lost, and so they have to re-engage the members on the same topic, right? So double checking that type of question has or has not already been asked to your community members. And really making sure when you do collect information from your community members that it's being protected and stored appropriately. Do you have a communications work plan? You know, a bit of a schedule of events that you can plan in advance. Again, you know, knowing how your members want to be engaged. What are their preferences in terms of, you know, days of the week and formatting and that sort of stuff. Knowing who your audience is, and if you have to do targeted engagement, right? So community engagement is one thing, but sometimes we really need to pick out, you know, those key audiences. It could be you know, the CP holders in your community, or it could be certain family groupings that are impacted by a certain project, right? So really knowing your audience and knowing what their preferences are. Council's role, if you have any committees, the committee's role, really important things to think about in a community engagement strategy, especially, you know, with chief and council. Leadership needs to understand the project and what their role is. That's really key. And just other really practical things, you know, having a defined schedule of events that you can, you know, make available to membership, put it on your website, put it in newsletters on Facebook, etc. You know, that's really important, especially for leadership. You know, you want leaders attending these meetings and community engagement sessions, you know, but they have very busy schedules. So you want to make sure you've got a good amount of notice that you can provide to everyone, so you get more, you know, participation. So lots to think about there, but I'll leave it at that and go to the next slide, please. Right, so land code communities are doing a lot of different things to increase and actually build community engagement into their legal processes. So a lot of land codes, for example, establish a lands advisory committee. So that's a permanent committee that's defined in your law. And those committees usually play a really key role in community engagement. And in fact, they're made up of community members. So using a lands advisory committee is a great form of community engagement. And sometimes those committees can actually be delegated authorities, and they can be, you know, lands authorities and not just an advisory committee. I mentioned before that land code often sets out thresholds and when membership meetings need to occur. It could be, for developing a certain kind of law or plan, or making some kind of decision that's going to have a lot of impact on the community, like, for example, approving a significant lease on your lands, right? So those membership meeting requirements are built into a land code. Same with planning, a land use plan and a community plan in particular. Those are very high level impactful plans that are going to shape your community for years to come. And so land codes are often sending a signal that, hey, a land use plan is so important, we're going to require some kind of community approval. And to amend or change that plan, that also is going to require community approval. Oftentimes when it comes to developing laws, there's usually membership input required in land code law development procedures. And there's other community approvals may be needed in your land code. So it's really important to know that land codes can establish these kind of thresholds and legal requirements, and two, that land governance under land code is really based on community engagement. It's about empowering the membership and again, returning to Indigenous planning, away from the Indian Act. Next slide, please. So in the developmental stages of developing your land code, communities often use like a land code committee. And for efficiency's sake, oftentimes once the land code is in place, that land code committee can morph into a lands advisory committee or lands authority, depending on what your land code says. So these committees in a land code, they're enshrined in your law, so they're like a standing committee almost. There's lots of different models in terms of who can be eligible to sit on the committee and what their role is. Sometimes they're very defined just in terms of law development, but other land codes speak about committees playing a huge role in almost every aspect of lands governance under the land code, right? So, but a big piece of community engagement in lands advisory committees is that those committee members are community members, and they're obviously family groupings and that are important in a lot of communities. So those committee members may be responsible for engaging their families outside of the committee times and really making sure that everything that's being discussed at the committee level is being filtered out to the families, and feedback is being brought back to the committee table. And again, depending on your land code model, a committee can be a recommending or an advisory body, or it can actually have delegated authority, which is a really, an empowering model for community engagement. Next slide.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. I think I appreciate all those points, and I just want to apologize first off. I'm doing the driving here, the presentation, so I still have my learners, so I'm still trying to figure out the nuts and bolts and everything, but. We just want to delve in a little bit deeper on considerations when you're looking to develop a community engagement strategy. And so we're just providing some questions, and first off, it's just like understanding what the purpose of engagement is, like what decision or project is this engagement going to inform. It really helps better determine strategies that you're going to use, and just who to engage, when to engage them, and all those sorts of things. Again, it's looking like, what does successful engagement look like, right? So once you have that purpose, okay, this is what we're trying to achieve, what does success in the end look like? Is it just an opportunity to ask questions and people to be educated? Is it an opportunity to raise concerns? Because you expect there's probably going to be some contentious meetings that are going to be happening. So what is successful engagement going to look like? It's not always a conflict-free engagement session. That's not maybe always going to be success. It may be that there may be opportunities to create that meaningful and productive areas of conflict, because sometimes that happens. Or is it just to provide comments and feedback and just trying to get general feedback on a certain project? Also looking at just kind of building on what Stephen was mentioning, who needs to be engaged. So when you are going to engage, let's say youth or elders or off-reserve members, it's just looking at the engagement strategy that would be effective and meaningful for those targeted audiences. And just some other factors, just identifying those engagement opportunities. So you can piggyback another session. So if there is, let's say you're developing a environmental management plan and a land use plan at the same time, or roughly that they're overlapping, that you can piggyback on those sessions so you can really be a little bit more efficient and be considerate of your community members' time. You know, time is very precious, and we know that like engagement fatigue is a real thing, and so you don't want to over engage, and because it can be a lot at times. As well, having a shared engagement calendar, so just everyone knows when it's coming and they can expect it, and they can know to plan for it. And then just also looking to integrate that engagement and input. So working with other processes, if they're happening, to integrate those to be a little bit more efficient with your time there. Looking at what the role of leadership and staff is, and how they'll be involved.
No, so, never. I know how hard it is by myself at home.
Sorry, folks, if you could just mute. Thanks so much. So understanding what the role of staff is, and just really helping to deliver and develop some key messages. Can be very helpful, because often at times leadership may not know, or may not know the best way to approach a certain topic. So if you can provide some just bullet points or key messages for leadership, that can go a long way in just helping have that consistent messaging there. Know your audience, so really understanding how your community wants to be engaged. So if you have a community that really uses Facebook a lot, then use Facebook to engage your community, right? So don't use these platforms that maybe are unfamiliar, or methods that may not be effective, because you can put a lot of time and money into those, and they may not get you what you're looking to get. And then the last year, with my fun little bounce in there, is to make a creativity in your engagement methods. So, you know, use visual images, songs, or videos in your materials. We have some examples that we can provide, but use your creativity and try to do something that reflects your community in the engagement. So just looking at implementing your community engagement strategy, you know, really looking who's doing the engagement. Is it the land staff, or is it a consultant? Who's designing that process? Looking at those values that inform your engagement, any cultural protocols that are really important and should be used. Just really considering that holistically, and understanding who is doing the engagement, and if a consultant is going to be delivering that, or going to be co-delivering that, to make sure that they're cognizant of your cultural protocols and how your community would like to be engaged. Just thinking about what tools and techniques you can use. So surveys, you can use online surveys, you can use paper surveys, you can go door to door and you can gather input that way. World Cafe style, a whole bunch of different methods you can use, and understanding that COVID has impacts to how we engage, but there's lots of ways we can think around that, and we'll get into that a little bit more later on in the presentation. So really looking at how you collect and store the information is also a big piece. It's one thing to actually have that information, but the next piece is just having it there, collecting it, so then you can go back and look at it. But then also, when you want to communicate afterwards, what steps were taken and the information that was received, it's really important to just have essentially like a document storage process, or a comment storage process that is easy and can be navigated without too much hassle. And then another really important piece here is how you honor the contributions that your community members make, right? So if it's whatever contributions that you think would be meaningful to your community members, I think that's important. So whether it's providing that nice space with a nice meal, and maybe some takeaways, some information to be taken away, that's great. Sometimes there's some project-related swag that could be developed, but that's also a little costly at times. But it's just thinking about how you honor it. So, and if you want to pay elders for providing their attendance, or whoever needs to be provided honorariums, that's also a very important component. And then just looking at what your budget and your time limit, right? So understanding what your schedule is, maybe even working backwards from that end date, so you know that we have to have this project finished by then. So let's work backwards to figure out when engagement has to happen, and also understanding that those engagement pieces are really critical in the planning process and the process in general when you're looking to develop any sort of planning document or land code. And so just understanding that schedule is a big driver, and engagement is a big piece of that schedule. And just a reminder, we are definitely here to assist you. So if there's anything we can do to help when you're looking to develop or implement your community engagement strategy, we're here to help for sure. So this slide is just looking at more of on the ground. So we have this community vision, and you've gathered that, and you reached out to your community members, and you have a pretty good sense of what the community would like to do and where they want to go. And you can then develop some engagement principles. So understanding what's important to your community. So if that's honoring your First Nations history, or having an engagement process that's really inclusive and make sure that everyone is heard from. Transparency, so communicating those results to people who have provided input. That's also can be a principle that your community could take. And then, or just knowledge sharing and valuing that knowledge. And then as we go one level further, then you kind of start to strategize. Okay, so like, how are we going to honor our First Nations history? It's by including language, and we can include cultural knowledge and symbols and community art. And those are just specific strategies that could be used for honoring your First Nations history. And there could be other strategies that you use for creating inclusive engagement and transparency. So just to give you a sense of how you dig down and go from this broad community vision and down towards on the ground of what those tools actually look like. So again, it could be Facebook, it could be newsletters, presentations, campfire chats, Zoom meetings like this, or workshops, doing on-the-land tours, storytelling, and using music and art in engaging your community members. Those can all be things that are tools that you have in your engagement tool belt, so to speak. So we're just going to go on to the next slide here, and just to talk about just different methods. So here's some examples, and we have on the right-hand side, we have different videos that have been produced from different communities. So understanding that videos are a great way to communicate what's important, how to educate on the project and the issue at hand. They're really easily accessible. People can go there anytime and look at them, or watch it multiple times, or even pause halfway through to really process and unpack some things that are in there. So they're really an effective tool. But we also have, there's other tools as well. So you have in-person meetings, you can have meetings with a whole bunch of different targeted groups, phone calls, you can kind of go old school and have those party lines if you want, and you can just use a phone and you can phone up somebody. And that's something that a little bit, I think in the world of online engagement, phone calls kind of get forgotten, but a very effective tool just if you want to engage with folks who maybe one-on-one have something to contribute. You can look at emails, door-to-door, community events, and you can even do an info booth at those, so you can just have an opportunity to educate, right? A big part of engagement is the education piece. And then again, we have the social media, newsletters, websites, and videos and all that sorts of thing. So I'm just going to go on. I think, Stephen, you have the next slide here.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, this slide is speaking about sort of multiple levels of community engagement, and really talking about how planning and community engagement is again, it's just such a core part of land code governance, and that it results in specific or there are specific types of decisions that you likely will need to make in your community under land code. And there's, I think, different tools, tips, and techniques you can use for different types of decision making. So just to briefly explain this slide. So on the left, we've got the framework agreement and land code. So again, the land code development process is heavily involved by the community. And in fact, the land code has to be approved through a ratification vote. And then that's, that land code sets up, this kind of process where community engagement and your lands advisor committee and chief and council and staff are all working together under the rules and procedures established by your land code, to do planning and decision making, right? So lands governance planning, if you guys were in our previous session, planning is all about community engagement, and it's all about identifying the public interest and trying to make decisions that are in the best interest of your community. So governance is fundamentally about planning, which is fundamentally about community engagement, right? So it's all connected, right? And so there's kind of these broad sort of decision areas that a First Nation is going to be responsible for under land code, that such as environmental management, use and occupancy, community development, law development. And so just thinking about, what are the areas where you need to make decisions, and what are some strategies and tips and techniques you can use to help make decisions. So for its environmental planning and stuff about the land, well, I think a land-based approach is really key. And as Adam had said, get out on the land and actually go to those places that you're talking about and do that on the ground engagement there. If it's about use and occupancy or community development, I've seen some really great use of Lego in engagement techniques, where you actually, let's everybody get some Lego and let's build the type of community we want to see with Lego, and like really fun and interactive kind of things. And things like law and planning development, that can get a little technical. So maybe our engagement needs to be more about workshop and knowledge mobilization, and really trying to build some technical knowledge before we get into some of the feedback we need from the community, right? So again, just lots to think about in terms of community engagement. And I really want to echo what Adam had said. We're the Resource Center. We've done so much. We've helped communities with community engagement, especially in the land code development process and with land use planning. So yeah, reach out to us if we can help in your community engagement strategies. We're happy to. Thanks. Next slide.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that point, and I'll point to Jeremy and Bonnie as great people to reach out to as far as when it comes to land code engagement and that component. And Stephen and I can support the planning engagement if we could divide it that way. But so the next important component we really did want to look at is understanding that consultants are going to play a role in community engagement, likely when it comes to land use planning or environmental management planning, or a lot of those planning reports and documents that you're creating. And so it's really important to think about what role consultants will play in community engagement. And so here we've just provided some examples and some suggested tips. Again, this is going to come down to how your community wants to use consultants as a resource. And I think the biggest message we want to drive home here is that it really is a community-led process. And so consultants should be there either they can provide capacity or an expertise that maybe you don't possess, or just maybe even do work that you have no time for because your hands are already full. And so really they can help design and facilitate those meaningful conversations with your community. But at that same time, they should be building capacity within land staff. So if they do have a certain skill set that maybe your community doesn't have, they should be teaching that to your land staff, whoever's in that role, whether it's a lands manager or a coordinator or whatever that person, whatever their job is. The consultant should be there to help them grow and to learn. And so maybe the next time around that they won't need to rely on consultants so much, or not at all, because they now have those skills and they can do it themselves. I think it's also really important that to note that the consultant ideally should be taking direction from the lands manager and staff, because planning really should be a community-led process. And just the last point there is being accountable for the outcomes of engagement. I really think it's important to not close that door. So as soon as the land use plan is done, or whatever planning document or whatever process you've hired a consultant to support you with, that once their time is done, or that report is finished, they should still be accountable for the outcomes, right? So if that land use plan just kind of sits on the shelf, I would urge you to go back to that consultant and say, this didn't work. This isn't what we wanted. This should have been corrected, or whatever it could be. Maybe it'd be a law that they provided in draft form, or however they supported you. They really should be accountable for their work. I kind of make it comparable to the mechanic, right? So if you bring your car into the mechanic and they are supposed to fix something and they don't, you would likely go back to the mechanic and say, hey, you should fix this. And so I think maybe you can use the same approach when hiring a consultant, to say if they broke something, they should fix it. Or if they gave you something that maybe didn't work that well, they should help fix it. And so it's just maybe really redefining what that relationship looks like at times, and understanding it's a community-led process. So before I get into using surveys, and we're going to have a little brief portion on surveys and questionnaires, but I'm actually going to pop us out of here. I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second. And I'm going to provide just an overview. We have a kind of a cool engagement tool that I wanted to show folks. And think it would be a nice opportunity just to even make a little break in this session, and we can have a little bit more engagement ourselves. So I think I've got the chat button here. I'm just going to share my screen again. So we're going to do a session here, and it's just this is a product called Mentimeter, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop the website into the chat function here. So if folks can just either just, I'm not sure if you can click on that, but just copy and paste what I put in the chat there. It's also at the top here. It's just mentee.com, and then there's a code that you can type in when you go there. And so this is a tool that can really be easily used for community engagement, and it's kind of fun. And what we're going to do is create a word cloud. So once you go into mentee.com and start writing, putting the code, then you can start putting in answering the questions. So the question for this one is, what is your favorite comfort food? Just to give us a sense of how this tool works. So you can see it start to populate here. And so you can see it'd be a really fun tool to use with community members as you ask a question. So it could be, what are the values that should drive engagement? Or what is the most important to our community? You can see it start to populate real time. And the words that are bigger are the ones that have more responses. So it looks like chocolate is obviously a comfort food. That makes a lot of sense. And so I'm just putting mine in as well. So just pardon me for 1 second. Yeah, and as each response comes in, you'll see it kind of reorganize and shift and grow. So it's a really can be a really powerful tool when engaging the community, because it's real-time feedback, and you can show that your inputs are being listened to. So there's definitely some. I'm actually surprised chocolate's such a comfort food. I thought it'd be like more like a soup or chili or something like that, or something warmer. Yeah, so we just want, I'm not sure if folks, we've had about 22 folks who have, just making sure that, let's give us some more time for this to populate here. We have about 24 respondents. Oh, there's soup. I mentioned the soup, and see the power of suggestion. It got in there. Yeah, so it's really kind of cool, and it can be fun, and it's something that you know, and you can do this in person as well. So this doesn't have to be something that's just online engagement. You can do this in an in-person community meeting, as long as there's there does have to be Wi-Fi or at least data connection on folks' phones or computers. But it can be something you do in person as well. So it's not just the online realm. Yeah. So actually there's another one that I wanted to go through. I don't want to cut anyone's opportunity off to contribute, but looks like we have about 30 folks, so that's pretty good. I'm curious, maybe as we go through this, I'm curious to see if anyone's like, oh, that's crazy, I didn't know that breadfruit. Oh, breadfruit, that's I love. So my wife's from Grenada. I really like breadfruit. That's a great. It's like for those who aren't familiar with breadfruit, it's kind of like, it's in the potato family. Very, very nice. It tastes like bread, but it's a fruit. And yeah, it's good. Anyways, okay, so I'm going to go on to the next slide here. And actually, also what I wanted to do before I did that, I wanted to kind of show you the inside of how so how you actually make it. It's really, really simple. So this is the website. It's called menteemeter.com. And on the right-hand side here, here's your question. You just put your question in here. You enter the number of participants, of entries per participant that they can enter. And then that's pretty much it. So you can download the results if you want. So you want to take those away later. And so you can print this off. You can post it somewhere if you like, or you can reset the results. So if you say, okay, I want to, next session, we download the results already, we want to reset the results, I use that feature. And then when you go to present, you just press right there. So it's pretty straightforward. It's just kind of getting comfortable with the app. So we're going to use this one, and I'm going to present again, and hopefully it doesn't, my apologies if it gave us a new code. I'm not sure if that's the same code we had as last time. Yeah, so now it should automatically, when you go back in, yeah, it should automatically load, and you can choose up to 2 options. So this kind of works like a .democracy, virtual .democracy. And so it's really cool. You can see it real time, the different areas being populated. So again, it could be a really useful tool just to get a snapshot, right, of like what the community envisions for, in this case, what are the best use of lands in the community's core. And so, you know, some of those ones that are closer, that are, you know, the community space and admin buildings, and those ones that are a little bit closer, yeah, you want to unpack those more, but ones that are clearly like community space cultural, it helps with that decision-making process, and it helps just to triage and to kind of prioritize what's important. And obviously you can use this for a variety of different questions. So we'll just give this a second to populate. Yeah, so it's great, and just looking at it, it can be a very helpful tool. And if anyone has any questions on this one, I'm happy to answer as well. And I'll just press escape here as well to get out of the presenter mode, so you can kind of see the nuts and bolts of how this one was created. So just again, on the right-hand side here, you can ask your question, and then you can provide the options, and you can provide lots of options there. And so it's a pretty simple tool. It's just kind of getting comfortable with using it. But as far as the questions you ask and the options and inputting those, it's fairly straightforward. And then again, you have your results that you can download, or if you want to have a new set, you can reset those. And then you can use up to 500 participants. So I think it's definitely within the realm of all the work that we're doing. There's not too many times you have more than 500 people. So it would be more than enough on that realm. So I'm just going to bring up the presentation here again. Great. So hopefully that was informative and something that folks could use. And if you have any questions about kind of working with Mentimeter or any online engagement tools, Stephen and I are definitely happy to help. But obviously Jeremy and Bonnie are as well. We're all happy to help and walk through that process and just even troubleshoot, because technology can be finicky at times. So we're here to help. So just moving on, we're going to look at surveys. So understanding the role of surveys in collecting information and how we go about really using them effectively. So first off is, what information do you want to know? So it's just establishing what is the goals of the survey. Is it a specific question, or are there lots of questions? Really trying to scope those questions that you're providing. And I think also understanding that the length of the survey really does matter. If it's too long or too onerous, people, they may just quit the survey, or they may not engage in it at the beginning. So it's really important to try to keep it to a reasonable level, and understanding that if you're looking at a really in-depth topic, that 5 questions may not be enough. But maybe it's just you start having an initial survey with 5 questions to really help scope the issues, and then you can determine those interested folks and people who would be more interested in providing, you know, more feedback. Then you can do other surveys that are a little bit longer. Types of questions. So it's just looking at, again, at what information are you looking to get, right? So if it's open-ended questions where you just ask a question and they can provide the information that they want, or if you're looking for them to choose specific options. So if, just like the question that we did before, what's the best use of a community space? If you left that open-ended, you get a whole variety of answers, or you could get answers that are kind of similar, but you're not sure if they're exactly similar, because people might word it in a different way. So if you have those close-ended responses, it's a little bit more, it helps to kind of guide, okay, we know exactly what they're talking about. And if you are going to use that close-ended approach, it's always helpful just to provide opportunity for further comments, because you don't want people to feel like, I don't like any of those options. And so maybe they don't like any of those options. And if they do feel that way, then there's an opportunity to provide more information. That's always a good way to catch all that information there. So yeah, so here's an example of those. So how satisfied were you? And there's like a scale there. I'm very satisfied, not so satisfied, or just leaving it open-ended. Can really help get the results that you're looking for. And then data collection and analysis. Keep it simple is often a rule. So it's really helpful to keep it simple and whatever works for your community. And when you're looking to collect that data and store it and then analyze it in the future. So it's kind of bringing it full circle. When you're looking at the information that you want to know, it's really important to think about what the output of that data is to make sure that you're able to answer that question of what you want to know. So is the end result providing you the information that helps you move forward with the information that you're trying to gather? So we just have a little tutorial on using Microsoft Forms as a survey tool. So as you can see, Jeremy's digital version is going to walk us through this nice little tutorial. But if there are any further questions, Jeremy, who's on the call today, he can definitely answer those. So I'll just press play here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeremy and I'm a support technician.
Can you guys hear the audio or no?
Not great.
Pretty low.
Oh, sorry. Can people hear it okay, or is it not great?
It was really low.
Okay.
Okay,
We'll try this again, and
I think it might be a setting on the Zoom screen.
Here, if you guys just 1 second, I'll just pause my share and then share sound. I think we got this now. Ooh. Sorry. Okay, so I think we should work now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeremy and I'm a support technician with the First Nations Land Management Resource Center. Today, I'm just going to be taking you through a tutorial on how to use Microsoft Forms as a survey tool. To get started, you'll just want to open up your web browser and type in office.com. This will take you to the Microsoft Office homepage where you'll be asked to sign in. If you have an account, you can just click sign in. If you don't have an account, you can sign up for a free version of Office at the link below. I have an account, so I'm going to click sign in. I'll enter my email address and then I'll enter my password. This will take me to my Microsoft Office. So on the left-hand side here, you'll see all of the apps. So I'm just going to click all apps. This will show them on the full screen. So I'm going to click Forms. I want to start a new survey, so I'll click New Form. And this will open up my blank form. So you can do these steps in any order you like. I'm just going to start with hovering over the untitled form box, and I'll click on that. This will allow me to title my survey. So I'm just going to title it Land Code Development Survey, and I'll provide a brief description. So a brief survey intended to gather information on our land code process. So my next step, I will add our logo. So if I click on the image box here, this side window will appear. You can do an image search, you can upload from your OneDrive, or you can upload from your computer. I'm going to upload from my computer. I have a logo saved on my desktop, so I'm just going to click on the logo and I'm going to open it. This will open the logo right next to the title. So if it loads perfectly great, if it doesn't, you can click on this trash can icon here. This will delete the logo and you can try uploading it again. The next step I'm going to do is I'm going to add a theme or a background. So I'm going to click on theme. You'll see here there's a number of colors that you can choose from. I'm going to add a custom theme. So here you have an option to add a custom color using a hex code, or you can add an image. So I'm going to add an image. Again, this window will pop up. You can do an image search, upload from your OneDrive, or you can upload from your computer. I'm going to upload from my computer. I have a background saved on my desktop, so I'm going to open that. And you'll see my background up here around the survey. So I'm just going to make sure that it all looks good on the desktop. This is what the participant will see. You can also check to see how your survey will be presented on a phone. So here you can see the mobile app version. So I'm just going to go back, and when I was looking at the preview, this color kind of washed out the logo a little bit. So I'm going to go back to the theme, and I'm just going to enter a different hex code, and hopefully that will fix the color a bit. So I'll just double check. It shows up a bit better. I'll just leave it like that. The next step I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding questions. So you have a few options when you decide to add questions. To get started, you'll click Add New. You'll have a few options here. You have multiple choice, text response, rating, date, and if you click the drop down, there's a few: ranking, Likert scale. You can ask the participant to upload a file, net promoter score. So I'm just going to start with a text response, and I'll say, what is your first and last name? And so the participant will enter their response in the box below. If they were to require a lot of space, you could create a long answer response box by just checking that long answer toggle. We're just going to leave it as a short answer, but we are going to require this question to be answered. So I'm just going to click on add another question, and I will do a multiple choice. So I'm just going to say, have you heard of the framework agreement on First Nation land management? So this one's going to be a multiple choice. So I'm just going to, we'll see suggested options here. So I'll click yes for option 1, no for option 2, and I'll add a third option that just says unsure. So if you wanted to allow participants to select multiple answers, you would click on the multiple answers toggle. This would allow you to select all of them if you wanted to, but because this is a yes or no question, we're just going to turn that off. And we will leave this one as being required as well. And so I'm just going to add a third option, or third question, sorry. And I'm going to do the net promoter scale. So I'll just say, how familiar are you with land code? And so in here, I'll just change these to being not familiar at all, and then very familiar. All right, so now that we have our questions put into the survey, I'm going to click on preview again, and I'm just going to look over the survey just to make sure that everything looks good. I will also check on the mobile app just to make sure. And then, so once you're sure that the survey does look good, you can go back to your main screen here. You'll go up here. If you're ready to share your survey, you can go up to the top right hand corner and just click share. You'll see here, it'll just say send and collect responses. So you'll want to set who can respond to the survey. So you have a few options here. You can click anyone can respond, only people in my organization can respond, specific people in my organization can respond. So we're going to click anyone can respond. And we'll just use this link here. So you have a few options down here. Oh, sorry. You have a few options down here. You can do the link, you can do a QR code, you can email out the survey. So we're just going to do a link. I'll copy it out, and then I will start a new window. I'll go into the survey and I'll just answer the questions. So this is what your participant will see. So I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to say very familiar, and I'll say submit. So this is the screen that the participant will see. If we go back over to our screen, you'll see the responses. There's one response. So if you can click on the responses page, you'll see here, so the answer to what is your first and last name, you have one response. It's myself, Jeremy Bonham. Have you heard of the framework agreement on First Nation land management? Yes. And how familiar are you with land code? And you'll see the response there. So this is how you use Microsoft Forms as a survey tool. You can also export your results into Excel. So I'll just open them up just so you can get an idea of what that will look like. And you'll see the responses there. If you had more responses, they would continue down the page. And yes, I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at the Resource Center, and enjoy the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for, hopefully you guys enjoyed that video, and maybe I'll just, I'm not sure if Jeremy had any other thoughts you wanted to provide, or we can just continue on to the next session, but I do want to provide Jeremy an opportunity just for any follow-up points or anything like that.
Sure, thanks Adam. One thing I thought about after the video is that, just to mention, is that you can also print the survey and send out via snail mail or however you decide to distribute it. And then afterwards, you would just have to manually enter those responses into the platform. But outside of that, that's all I have to add.
Great. Now, thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate that. And maybe I'll just
hello, everyone.
There we go. So yeah, and maybe this is a good opportunity, and I'll hand it off to Bonnie. But if there are any questions that folks may have, it'd be great to, especially on surveys, as we just had that tutorial, it'd be great to get those.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks, Jeremy. That was really entertaining, and your Bitmoji character looks just exactly like you. I love it. Okay, so yes, right now is the question and discussion slide. However, I'm kind of thinking that give people a moment to think through what they might want to ask, if anything. And in the meantime, let's proceed and finish up the rest of the slides and then come back to, I'm just realizing now looking at it that the order is weird. Okay, thank you. So we just wanted to, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we want to share with you some links of interest. This presentation is going to be posted on the Links to Learning website, so you can access all the great resources that you see here at your leisure. So the links are for the VRC, and there's one directly to the First Nations, or the Framework Agreement on First Nations Land Management. And if you're interested in more information, there's a link there for you. We've got ISK's website up there, as they have information to share as well. Of course, the Mentimeter that we walked through, which was fantastic. Thanks for that, Adam. And Microsoft 365 and Office 365, all the tools you'll need to get working on great surveys and whatnot. Next slide. So not only do the Resource Center Support Services technicians assist with land code development, we're here to support signatory nations in land code implementation, and will coordinate the support services of land code governance advisors as requested by you. So if your nation is interested in accessing any of the training, supports, and resources that have been presented to you today, you can do that by connecting directly with your support services technician. And if you're not sure who that point of contact is, you can reach out to the regional manager of your area, and they'll be able to connect you with your dedicated technician. We are pretty easy to find on the Resource Center website. There's a list of staff, and that'll let you know who to contact. Next slide, please. And here's our support technicians. So these folks are your first point of contact. If you want any specialized services and supports, we're going to connect you with those and make sure that you get everything that you need. We at the Resource Center place great emphasis on regional representation of technical staff. So geographically, it coincides with the distribution of signatory nations. You can see that, that BC and the East have the most technicians, as they have the most land code nations to support. An important point to note is that many of the managers and technicians that you see on that list, they were integral to the development and the implementation of land codes in their respective nations. The insight of going through that process is invaluable to the support that they are able to provide to you, to communities proceeding towards self-governance. I myself was lands manager for Sooke First Nation when we went through the land code process, and it was a great and wonderful process, and we've been operating under our land code for, gosh, about 15 years, close to. So, okay, so Adam, if you want to just go back to the questions slide, we can take any questions that you might have. Anything going on in the chat?
We have a couple questions in the chat.
Great.
So one is from Denise. Can the MS form survey be completed anonymously? It can be completed anonymously. It just it requires the selection of an option when you're creating the survey to collect anonymous responses. And then also you don't have to ask people's names and whatnot. That was just a question. And then we have a second question. What kinds of follow-up is done with surveys once the feedback has been integrated or will be used? So many times I've heard community members, especially elders, state that they answered surveys but never saw what or how their input was used, and that they were getting tired of surveys. So I may, oh, sorry. I was going to pass that one to Adam and Stephen.
Stephen, you can feel free to go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, it's a really great question, Valerie, and I think it's not just relevant for surveys, but almost any type of community engagement we do. For me, I think a best practice I would recommend is when you do a survey or a community engagement event or some kind of activity where you're getting the feedback of your members, follow up with like a what we heard report. Just a really simple 1 or 2 pager saying this is like, thank you for sharing. This is a summary of what you told us. So there's that piece. And then I think the reason why we do surveys on that, especially in a planning context, is to inform what our plans are saying. And so one way to kind of follow up with our engagement is to actually implement our plans and to show the community that we've created a plan based on your input and we're following through on these actions that you helped us identify. And so really building that implementation and constantly reporting back, saying what we heard, what we're up to, and just keeping that communication open at all times, I think. But specifically with surveys, yeah, I think a what we heard report is really useful. Adam, any thoughts you'd like to add?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think just building on that, it's really, especially for decisions that may be a little bit more contentious, or that there is like some differing opinions in the community, just to like, for that transparency piece, is to say, here's the information we received, here are the factors for consideration, and here's how the decision was made. So it's not so much as to say, okay, we have your input in the door, and then it goes into the planning factory, and then out comes a plan. It's like, open the door to the planning factory, show them how it's made, how those decisions are made. That can go a long way in, I think, building trust and creating through transparency. But then also, I think folks probably wouldn't be as tired of doing surveys if they saw that their input was being received and acted upon. It may just actually give them that that motivation to be like, yeah, they're listening, and I'm going to do this again because I know it's worth my time. Just things for consideration.
Thanks, Adam. I'm going to take the next one, Jeremy, if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
absolutely.
Just because I love the question or the non-question. This is from Jasmine, and she says, it's not so much a question as a comment. We are in the developmental stage of the land code, and what I find I'm having the biggest hurdle with is knowing what topic to start with. Should it be land code or the FA or the IA or the Indian Act? Each topic is so broad, and I want to deliver the information as efficiently as possible. So my first comment on that would be definitely get in touch with your technician. Whoever is the lead on your file will be able to answer those questions. But just generally to answer, yeah, you're kind of going to start at the beginning. I would tend to start at the history of the framework agreement. What is it? Why are we doing this work in the first place? And then move on from there. We do offer comparison charts, one-pagers and that sort of thing that compare the framework agreement land management versus Indian Act land management. So you get a real clear sense right away. Your members will get a real clear sense of what the differences are between management under one and the other. There's absolutely all kinds of time and room to tackle each of these topics piece by piece, bit by bit. It's an overwhelming amount of information, but there are so many opportunities for engagement with community to cover these topics. You really want to take it slow and in bite-sized chunks so that at the end of the day, you can be confident that your people know why they're in this process and are able to make a very informed decision when it comes time to vote on your land code. I would encourage you to reach out to your technician, and they will definitely be able to support your process. Oh, and it looks like Denise was answering that question. Thanks, Denise.
So I know there's a question just kind of scrolling back up just from Jason regarding if Menti can be put into Facebook as a survey. So yeah, it can be I'm trying to think about the way you would use it. Very similar to here, you could provide the link in Facebook in the chat or post it on the page or whatever, and then the code, and then folks could just go in through there. But I think it can't be accessed through Facebook as like within Facebook. You'd have to go to an external website, just opening a new browser and accessing it there. So hopefully that answers your question, Jason.
Looks like we've got a raised hand.
Yep. From Valerie.
Oh, hi. Adam, thank you very much for your answer earlier. One of the things that I've been encouraging people to look back at. First off, I just became a lands manager or director, sorry. And one of the things that I did was I asked the community for their community, the comprehensive community plan, to take a look at the feedback that was provided in the section on lands itself. And I indicated to them that one of the things I utilized in the CCP process prior to becoming a lands director was to apply for quick grants, like quick start grants for different things that were highlighted in the CCP to do just exactly what you said, Adam. When they start to see projects or programs crop up in the administration, they recognize themselves in that. You're like, hey, that was one of the ideas that I thought of, and they get more engaged as a result. And it's turned out to be really successful. So getting to know a grant writer, somebody who just likes to do that for fun, is always a good idea. And I've asked the current council that I'm working with to allow me the opportunity to take the CCP and the feedback in it and determine what parts of it are applicable to lands. Communities are now discovering that things like the emergency plan actually fall within the lands department. And what are they doing about that? Because of course, with the pandemic, everybody's mind is on emergency management these days. But just an idea, get to know a grant writer. Highly recommend it. Thank you for letting me share.
Yeah, thank you, Valerie, for that comment. And if I could just follow up, first off, congratulations on a new role. That's amazing. And I think also just building on the point that you made, not only I think you get that momentum in the community once they see their input being acted upon, but I think also when it comes down to implementation of, let's say, a land use plan or a CCP, and there may be some laws put in place or different policy, you'll find that it'll probably be more apt to follow those laws because they know that they had a part in creating them rather than it coming down and upon them. It's something that is coming within the community and something that they have support for. So it'd be easier on that end as well when you look to implement and create laws and things.
I appreciate that too. And there was a woman in the community chat room there talking about how they approached their land code and their land use plan and how they engaged all of the other departments in that process as well, not just the community members. And I'm really curious to know more about what this person did. But thank you so much for
Yeah, thanks, Valerie. No, that's a great point. Yeah, that breaking down of, call them silos, but yeah, breaking within the community, like staff and infrastructure, and that's great to have that cross communication there. So sorry, I'll put myself on mute now.
Not at all, Adam. That was great. Thank you very much. So just going to wrap up here. If there's any last minute questions, if anybody wants to jump in and say anything, please feel free to do that. In the meantime, we just want to thank you for taking the time to participate in this session today. We are here for you when you need us, and we look forward to supporting the great work that you and your communities are doing in the future. Thanks, everyone. Just going to hang for a minute until our time is up if anybody wants to jump in at any point. And thank you so much, Adam, Stephen, and Jeremy. It was really great. I really liked your video, Jeremy. That was funny.
Yeah, great job.
Oh, thanks.
And thank you all for being such great resources for people like myself, an old band manager for 25 years and community plan navigator for the last 4.5, and now back to lands, and I've gone in like a 30-year cycle. And 30 years ago, we didn't have this opportunity to have access to people like yourselves that are subject matter experts who can guide us through that process. And it's really, really appreciated. I'm so excited about this new journey in my life, being hired during COVID, but I'm excited as well. And I think I've met some of my team now, and it's weird to see me sitting as a director and not as one of the staff. So it's kind of awkward right now, but I'm excited, and I'm excited to see some old friends like Katie from the island in the group, because, you know, big fat circles. So I'm really appreciative of your organization and all the stuff I've been like absorbing for the last 4 weeks. So thank you.
You're very welcome, and thank you so very much for that feedback. It is really very much appreciated, and our organization is just getting bigger and bigger as the years go on, and there's no end to the expertise we're hiring on to help all of our nations. It's really quite different from back in my day in 2006 when my nation was passing our land code. Yeah, we had very few technicians to select from, and yeah, now we've got all kinds of technicians and experts, so no shortage of help for you all. Okay, 11:59, and that about wraps us up. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.